Beloved brothers and sisters, welcome to this sacred night, a night not like any other. As the world grows quiet and the noise of the day fades away, heaven leans close to listen. This is the hour when the Spirit of God moves gently through the darkness, touching hearts that are ready to receive His peace, His healing, and His breakthrough. A heartfelt welcome is more than a greeting, it is the opening of spiritual doors. It sets the tone for what is to follow and prepares hearts to receive what God intends to release. When we begin a message, especially one centered on prayer and divine connection, the welcome must carry warmth, sincerity, and an atmosphere of expectancy. It must make every listener feel not just invited, but embraced, seen by both the speaker and by God Himself. In moments like these, people are not merely attending a gathering, they are entering a sacred space, a meeting point between heaven and earth. The way the introduction unfolds determines whether their hearts open in faith or remain closed in hesitation. Therefore, the welcome should stir reverence but also comfort, letting each soul know that no matter who they are or where they come from, they are loved and desired in the presence of God. A powerful welcome also creates unity. People may have walked in carrying their own struggles, fears, doubts, grief, or exhaustion, but when the voice of the speaker carries the spirit of love and divine peace, something begins to change in the atmosphere. The welcome bridges the gap between the human and the divine, between the weary soul and the comforting arms of the Father. It transforms the space from an ordinary setting into a sanctuary filled with expectancy. It is as if the speaker is saying, "You are safe here. You are seen. You are loved. And tonight, something sacred is about to happen." This kind of greeting does not rely on eloquence or formality, it flows from a heart filled with compassion and conviction. Moreover, an inspired welcome reminds people of their purpose for being there. It draws their attention away from the distractions of daily life and anchors their focus on God. When someone says, "Welcome to this sacred night," it is not merely a statement, it is a spiritual awakening. It signals that what is coming next is divine in nature. In such a moment, faith begins to stir quietly in the hearts of those listening. Their burdens begin to lighten, their worries begin to fade, and hope starts to rise. The welcome is like the first spark of a candle that will soon light up the entire room. It does not perform the miracle itself, but it invites the miracle to begin its work. When people feel genuinely welcomed into the presence of God, their hearts become fertile ground for peace, healing, and breakthrough to take root. The power and purpose of night prayers lie in their sacred ability to draw the human heart into deeper communion with God. When the day's distractions fade and the world grows still, the soul becomes more sensitive to divine presence. Night is not merely a time of rest, it is a spiritual hour when heaven opens its gates to those who seek God earnestly. In the quietness of night, the believer finds a unique intimacy with the Creator, an atmosphere where prayers rise unhindered, free from the noise of the world. This is why night prayers hold such power. They are not bound by time or place, but by the purity of intention and the depth of surrender. When a person kneels before God under the cover of darkness, they step into a realm where the natural yields to the supernatural, where the human heart can hear what the noise of the day had drowned out. The purpose of such prayer is not only to ask but to align, to bring one's thoughts, emotions, and desires into harmony with the will of God. Many breakthroughs are born in the stillness of night because it is in that hour that the Spirit listens more than it speaks. Night prayers are moments of revelation. They unveil hidden truths, expose the roots of pain, and ignite faith where fear once ruled. There is a special grace that rests upon those who seek God when the world is asleep because that pursuit demonstrates hunger, a hunger for closeness, peace, and transformation. The one who prays at night does not merely perform a ritual but enters a sacred exchange, offering tears, worship, and trust in return for divine peace, healing, and restoration. Furthermore, night prayers carry symbolic power. The darkness of the hour represents the struggles, uncertainties, and challenges of life, yet when one prays, the light of faith pierces through that darkness. It becomes a prophetic act of declaring that no matter how deep the night may seem, the dawn of God's promise will surely come. In these moments, prayer transforms from a request into a declaration of victory. The stillness of the night holds a sacred mystery. When the world becomes quiet and the rush of the day fades into silence, there is a divine invitation extended to the soul. It is in those quiet hours that God speaks most clearly, not through thunder or lightning, but through the gentle whisper that reaches the depths of the heart. The stillness is not emptiness, it is filled with the presence of the Almighty. In the calm of the night, distractions fall away, worries lose their voice, and the heart becomes attuned to the sound of heaven. It is in that silence that faith grows stronger, and the weary spirit finds rest in the embrace of divine peace. Night becomes a sacred meeting place where the Creator speaks softly to the created, restoring what the day's battles have broken. The beauty of the night lies in its ability to slow us down and make us listen. During the day, we are surrounded by noise, voices, duties, and endless activity that often drown out the gentle voice of God. But in the night, the soul becomes still enough to hear. The whisper of God in the darkness is not loud because it does not need to be, it carries power not in volume, but in intimacy. When the heart is quiet, even the faintest touch of His presence feels like thunder. It is often in those hours when a person feels alone that God speaks words of comfort, guidance, and revelation. He reminds the broken that they are not forgotten, the weary that their strength will be renewed, and the fearful that His light will soon break through their darkness. In the stillness, every sigh becomes a prayer, and every tear becomes a testimony. The silence of night is not the absence of God's voice, it is the atmosphere where His whisper becomes clear. The heart that listens finds answers not through logic, but through peace. Many have discovered that what seemed impossible in the light of day begins to make sense when spoken to God in the quiet hours of night. There, burdens begin to lift, healing begins to flow, and courage is reborn. The night becomes a sacred sanctuary where heaven and earth meet, and the whisper of God transforms despair into hope, fear into faith, and restlessness into a deep, unshakable peace. Faith is the very heartbeat of prayer, and when believers gather under the quiet canopy of night, it is faith that turns words into power and longing into encounter. Night prayer carries within it a special invitation to believe that what we seek, peace, healing, and breakthrough, is not only possible but near. As the darkness surrounds, faith becomes the light that guides the soul toward hope. The night, though often associated with uncertainty or fear, becomes a sacred space for faith to rise and take hold of divine promises. In those moments, prayer is no longer a routine act, it is a declaration that even in silence, God is working, even in stillness, He is moving, and even in darkness, His light is breaking through. Faith gives voice to the unseen and strength to the weary. It transforms the act of prayer from pleading into trusting, from asking into receiving. When a person prays with faith during the night, something profound happens within. The burdens that once felt heavy begin to lift because faith whispers, "You are not alone." The wounds that seemed too deep begin to heal because faith says, "He still restores." And the walls that appeared unshakable begin to crumble because faith declares, "Nothing is impossible with God." Night prayer invites this kind of faith, not a faith born of emotion, but one anchored in the assurance of God's character. It is the faith that does not depend on what is seen, but on who is heard. In the unseen realm, faith stirs the heavens, drawing divine intervention into human struggle. Peace flows through faith because when the heart believes, anxiety loses its grip. Healing manifests through faith because it opens the soul to receive divine restoration. Breakthrough is birthed through faith because it aligns human will with God's perfect timing. Faith in night prayer is not about instant answers, it is about confident surrender. It is believing that as we kneel and whisper our petitions, the Almighty bends low to listen. It is knowing that every tear shed in faith becomes a seed for future joy. The darkness of night cannot extinguish a heart that believes, rather, it magnifies the light of trust shining within. In that sacred exchange between human faith and divine power, peace is restored, healing flows like a river, and breakthrough becomes not just a hope for tomorrow but a reality unfolding in the stillness of the night. Darkness and light have always stood as powerful symbols in the spiritual journey, representing struggle and hope, despair and renewal. The night, often wrapped in shadows and silence, can mirror the seasons of hardship that many face, moments when answers seem distant and the heart feels surrounded by uncertainty. Yet within this very darkness lies the opportunity for divine light to shine brightest. In the language of faith, darkness does not signify the absence of God, rather, it becomes the stage upon which His glory is revealed. Just as dawn follows the longest night, prayer transforms moments of despair into encounters with the renewing power of God. When we pray during the night, we are not only seeking light, we are declaring that the light already exists, even if unseen, and that it will break forth in its appointed time. This imagery of darkness giving way to light speaks to the soul that feels trapped in waiting. It assures the believer that no night lasts forever. Prayer becomes the bridge between pain and promise, between silence and song. As one lifts their voice in faith during the night, they echo creation's rhythm, where each sunrise testifies that God never leaves his people in the dark. In those hours when the world seems still, the believer's whispered prayers become candles of hope, flickering against despair. Each word uttered in faith draws down the presence of divine light, illuminating the inner world with peace and reassurance. It is in those moments that God takes what seems hidden in shadow and reveals his purpose through grace. When one embraces this truth, prayer shifts from desperation to anticipation. The heart begins to see that darkness is not a punishment but a passage, not an ending but a preparation. Through prayer, the believer learns that even when life feels surrounded by night, the light of God's love is working silently beneath the surface. The darkness becomes a womb for new beginnings, a space where faith matures and trust deepens. Every answered prayer at dawn carries the imprint of a night once spent in faithful waiting. This transformation from darkness to light becomes a symbol of renewal, reminding every soul that divine breakthroughs are often born in hidden, quiet hours. When faith meets the night with unwavering prayer, morning always follows, bringing with it peace, healing, and the radiant light of new beginnings. A rhythmic and faith-filled tone is the heartbeat of a powerful prayer message, carrying words beyond sound and turning them into a spiritual encounter. The tone of a speaker is not just about voice, it is about the spirit behind the voice, the conviction, passion, and reverence that flow through every word. When a message is delivered with rhythm and faith, it resonates deeply, stirring the soul and awakening the listener's spirit. The cadence becomes like a spiritual melody that draws hearts closer to God, creating an atmosphere of anticipation and divine presence. A rhythmic tone has a way of carrying the listener through waves of emotion, comfort, conviction, and hope, making the message not only heard but felt. It is through this flow that the listener is reminded that faith is alive, breathing, and powerful enough to transform any circumstance. Faith-filled speech carries authority. It does not tremble with doubt but speaks with the certainty that God's promises are true. When words are spoken in faith, they carry an invisible force that ignites hope in weary hearts. The tone becomes a vessel through which the listener begins to believe again, not because of eloquence, but because the spirit of faith within those words touches something deep inside. Every pause, every rise, and fall of the voice mirrors the rhythm of prayer itself, gentle yet powerful, calm yet filled with fire. This divine cadence lifts people from fear into trust, from sorrow into joy, from despair into expectation. It reminds them that God is near, that his hand is at work, and that breakthrough is not a distant dream but a living reality. The rhythm of such speech is not rehearsed but inspired. It flows from communion with God, where the speaker's own heart beats in harmony with heaven. When a person speaks under this anointing, the words no longer belong merely to the human tongue, they become instruments through which the Spirit ministers peace, healing, and strength. The message begins to move like living water, cleansing and refreshing every heart it touches. This tone does not entertain, it imparts. It does not merely inform, it transforms. A rhythmic, faith-filled tone builds an atmosphere of reverence and expectancy, preparing every listener to receive what God has prepared for them. It turns a gathering into a moment of encounter, where faith rises like a flame and hearts open wide to the miracles waiting in the presence of God. To open the heart and surrender burdens to God is one of the most profound acts of faith a person can experience, especially during moments of prayer. The night, with its calmness and solitude, invites the soul to release what has been carried throughout the day, the fears, failures, and hidden pain that weigh heavily on the spirit. In this sacred stillness, surrender is not weakness, it is the highest expression of trust. It is the moment when one stops striving and starts resting in the assurance that God is greater than every battle, every wound, and every unanswered question. Prayer becomes the channel through which the heart opens like a flower in the dark, offering its fragrance of faith and dependence to the Creator. When a person truly opens their heart before God, pretenses fall away, and authenticity flows freely. It is in that vulnerability that healing begins to unfold. The act of surrender allows divine exchange to take place. As one releases their burdens, God replaces them with peace. As one lays down sorrow, he lifts it with joy. As one confesses weakness, his strength begins to rise within. Many carry invisible burdens that words alone cannot describe, but when they bring them to the altar of prayer, something supernatural occurs. The weight that once pressed the heart begins to lighten, and the soul breathes again. God does not ignore a surrendered heart, he meets it with compassion, mercy, and power. The posture of surrender transforms prayer from a list of requests into an intimate conversation between father and child. It is where the wounded heart finds rest, and the anxious mind discovers stillness. Belief is the doorway through which miracles enter, and when faith rises in the heart, the impossible begins to bow before the power of God. To believe that tonight is a night of peace, healing, and breakthrough is to align one's spirit with the promises of heaven. This belief is not based on emotion or circumstance but on the unchanging nature of God, who delights in answering the cries of his people. When hearts are filled with expectation, the atmosphere shifts, prayer becomes more than words, it becomes a living force that pulls the supernatural into the natural. The moment faith says, "Tonight, something will change," heaven responds. Belief is the seed that unlocks the divine, and in the soil of a trusting heart, it grows into miracles that cannot be explained by human understanding. Every great move of God begins with expectation. When a person approaches prayer with the conviction that this night is different, their spirit awakens to the reality that God is ready to move. Faith does not wait for evidence, it creates it. The one who believes does not question whether peace will come but rests in the assurance that it already has. Healing begins to manifest not when the pain disappears, but when the heart dares to believe that God's hand is already at work. Breakthrough happens in the unseen first, chains begin to loosen, closed doors begin to shift, and the impossible begins to tremble. The believer's declaration becomes a spiritual command that invites heaven's intervention into earthly struggles. Belief turns an ordinary night into a divine appointment. It transforms a gathering into holy ground and prayer into an instrument of victory. When the heart is filled with faith, fear loses its authority, doubt is silenced, and the soul becomes confident in God's ability to do what he has promised. Every word of prayer spoken in belief becomes like light piercing the night, dispelling darkness and ushering in divine peace. Those who dare to believe step into a realm where limitations dissolve and miracles are born. Faith-filled belief is contagious, it spreads from one heart to another, igniting hope and stirring courage in every listener. When the people of God believe together, the heavens open wider, and his power flows freely among them. In that sacred unity of faith, the night becomes more than a moment, it becomes the turning point where peace descends, healing begins, and breakthrough is birthed in the presence of God.